Once you've received your USB token and installed the software on the necessary computers, it is now time to perform the setup steps in iSalus. This video will cover the 6 key steps necessary to enable EPCS. Step 1. Identify 2 individuals to manage the access controls for EPCS. This process requires 2 separate people at the practice to complete the EPCS setup. This can be any 2 people at the practice. However, at least one of the designated individuals must be a registrant who is authorized to issue controlled substances and who has obtained a 2-factor authentication credential. For this explanation, I will use the example of an office manager as the first user and the primary doctor at the practice as the second user. Later on, we will discuss the role of other providers at the practice as well. Now that you've identified 2 users to manage access controls for EPCS, let's set up the first provider. Step 2. Add the EPCS service level to the prescriber location. Now, let's add the EPCS service level to the provider. Most providers have already been registered with SureScripts. SureScripts is our partner responsible for sending all electronic prescriptions generated from Office EMR to the actual pharmacy. This step will add the EPCS service level for your provider, which sort of flips the switch at the SureScripts level, notifying them that this provider has this type of access. This can be done by anyone in the practice that has administrative privileges. Start by clicking on the Setup tab, then choosing Providers. Change the rendering indicator to Yes, then click Search. This will display a list of all rendering providers in the system. Double-click on the provider that you wish to set up and select the IDs tab. Most providers will then click the RX prescribing box. Special note here, for providers that prescribe medication for detoxification or maintenance treatment such as Suboxone or Subutex, you should have a special DEA number called a NADEAN number or Narcotics Addiction DEA number. If this applies to you, add that number to the NADEAN field on this window. For all other providers, simply click on the RX prescribing box. This screen shows a list of locations that have already been registered for the provider with SureScripts, likely for electronic prescribing of non-controlled substances or the ability to receive electronic refill requests. If your provider has never been registered, please contact the iSalus support team to have this initial registration take place. Select a location from the list on the left, and the details for that location will load on the right. There are 2 things that you'll want to do here. First, verify that the DEA number is correct or added. If it is not listed, click the New button and follow the steps to add the correct DEA number. Now, under the service level section, check the EPCS box, then click Save. This will send the information to SureScripts and their records will be updated. Repeat this step for each location and each provider that needs to be able to electronically prescribe controlled substances. Once all locations have the EPCS service level enabled, you're ready to move on to the next step. The next step in the process is to link the user to a provider within iSalus. This is best achieved by having each provider log into the system with their own user ID and password. From here, these individuals navigate to the Setup tab, then select Users. With their name selected in the list on the left, click on the provider icon at the top of the window. This will open the provider connection window. Type in the provider's name in the rendering provider search box and choose the appropriate option from the list. Then click the Save button. To add a new provider for this user or to remove a provider from a user, click the down arrow next to the New icon on the toolbar and choose the appropriate option. This screen is set up so that you are linking the logged in user to the appropriate provider. If needed, you can change the user that you are working with by selecting the action icon on the toolbar and choosing Switch User. You'll be required to enter the user ID and password for that person that you would like to modify. When you're done linking the users to the providers, close this window and proceed to the next step. Step 4. Set up the credential for the DEA registrant's user. In the first step, you would identify 2 individuals that are required to complete this process. We use the example of an office manager and the lead physician in the practice. For this step, we will be setting up the credentials for the DEA registrant's user, aka the lead physician in our case. So we will need the first person, in our case the office manager, to complete this step. However, the second user needs to also be present with their USB token available. Once logged in, navigate to the Setup tab and select Users. With your login selected on the left, click the credential setup icon from the toolbar. The list of credentials on the left-hand side of the screen should be blank. Select the action icon at the top of the screen and select Switch User. Enter the user ID and password for the DEA registrant. Again, in our scenario, this is the lead physician. Select the type drop-down and choose the IdenTrust F option. This is the option for EPCS. Once this is done, a new window will appear asking for the IdenTrust token to be inserted. Plug in the USB drive now and select Get Credential. A list of credentials on that computer will appear. This should be the list of names assigned to the tokens. Remember, early on, you had set up each computer that you plan to use with your token. All those names will appear here. Select the name of the person that you logged in as. Again, in our example, the lead physician, and then select Sign Credential. Read the statement that appears and select I agree to move to the next step. The password screen will appear from IdenTrust. This physician should enter his or her USB's token password and click OK. Close the window and you should see all of the values from the token fill into the user credentials section of the screen. The credential will now be enabled. Assuming this is the first time you have walked through this step, the first provider's credential will also be approved. Be sure you press the Save button to save these credentials. If your office only has one provider that needs set up for EPCS, you are now done at this point. EPCS has been both enabled and approved. Now, if you have more than one provider in the practice that needs to prescribe controlled substances, you will repeat the above process to add the additional credentials. To finish the credential setup for any subsequent providers, complete step 5, which is the lead physician approving the subsequent provider's credentials. Step 5. DEA registrant signs off on the credential. Now that all providers' credentials have been added to the system, they now must have their credentials approved. Remember, the very first step was to pick 2 people at the practice to complete this process. One of these individuals was the lead physician at the practice. This is the person that will need to complete the next series of steps. While logged in as the physician, navigate to the Setup tab and select Users. Click the credential approval icon from the toolbar. The list of credentials will be listed on the left-hand side of the screen. Select the user that is not yet approved. Their information will load on the right, then check the Approved box. You'll be prompted to insert your IdenTrust token. Then you'll be asked to agree to the authentication message. Select I agree. If prompted, enter the password for your token and click OK. Then click the Save icon and repeat these steps for all other users that are not yet approved. Once this is complete, everyone in your office can now electronically prescribe controlled substances. It is up to the practice to now maintain these credentials. Step 6. Maintaining and disabling EPCS access. Another key component and requirement of EPCS is that your office keeps this access and credential information up to date. The most crucial component is disabling access. There can be any number of reasons that this needs to take place, but we will review the 4 items that require EPCS to be disabled. Option 1. A hard token or any other authentication factor required by the 2-factor authentication protocol is lost, stolen, or compromised. Such access must be terminated immediately upon receiving notification from the individual practitioner. Scenario 2. The individual practitioner's DEA registration expires unless the registration has been renewed. Scenario 3. The individual practitioner's DEA registration is terminated, revoked, or suspended. Scenario 4. the individual practitioner is no longer authorized to use the electronic prescription application. For example, when the individual practitioner leaves the practice. In the event that any of these four scenarios arise, the practice is required and responsible for disabling access. To do this, you must first log in as an individual that has a registered token. From there, select the Setup tab and choose Users. With your own name selected, click the Credential Approval icon from the toolbar. The list of credentials will be listed on the left-hand side of the screen. Select the user that needs to be disabled. Their information will load on the right, and then deselect the enabled box. Then click Save. It is also a good idea to disable EPCS access at the provider level as well. This can be done by again navigating to the Setup tab. This time select Providers, search for all rendering providers, double-click on the affected provider's name, select the IDs tab, click the RX Prescribing button, select the prescriber location that is affected on the left-hand side of the screen, deselect the checkbox labeled EPCS, click Save. This has now notified SureScripts that this provider can no longer have access to this type of module within your office. Now that you understand how to manage access within iSalus, you're now ready to begin using the system to electronically prescribe controlled substances.